All right, 3, 2, 1.
Here to hijack this town and to try and make an issue out of getting guns out of good people's hands that can make a difference. And you know that, Beto.
Okay, we have something for her.
No, this is bullshit. It's about mental health and it's about the war on boys and masculinity. You're bullshit by being here. Shame on you, Beto. Why don't you debate me? Why don't you debate me? Go ahead. Answer my question. Answer my question, Beto. Come on. Come on, bring it up, Beto. Let me hear. What do you have to say about mental health? What do you have to say about urban violence? You don't care. The Democrats have been in charge of urban communities and cities for decades. The Democrats have failed. They don't care about you, sir. That's why he's in Sandy Hook. He doesn't care. It's bullshit. I grew up in Newtown. No, you're going to kick out a mother in this community? I grew up here. Right? My mom went to I'm a third generation Newtown. What are you Democrats are out. Trump 2020 is saving this world. You guys are right. And you know it, Beto. And answer me. Come on, bring it on.
All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to my interview with Rebecca Carnes, who is the mother and star of the video that you just saw and that I'm sure you've all seen and it's been circulating around the internet. So first things first, Rebecca, thanks for coming on.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me, Michael.
So I do want to add just a brief technical notice here. Apparently we are streaming in 640 by whatever dimensions. I normally stream at 1080p. I don't know what's going on with the broadcasting software, so I apologize to everybody for those technical difficulties that we may be having as a result of that streaming. So first things first, so the video that we just saw, I just want to say thank you to Rebecca. She was the star of that video that you just saw. She's the mother that was in that video. And so Rebecca, let's just start off with a conversation about Rebecca. First things first, where can people reach you?
Yeah, sure. So you can reach me at newtownrooster1990@gmail.com. 1990 is the year I graduated from Newtown High School. So, or also just visit my blog, newtownroosterct.com, and you can reach me through there. If you search Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and just type in Rebecca Carnes Newtown, I should come up too.
All right, super. And we'll give you another chance to do that at the end of the interview as soon as, right before we get into Q&A, which, by the way, is a reminder to everybody, go ahead and shoot those questions now that the stream is live, and we will get to your questions at the end of this video. Be happy to do some live Q&A. So like I said, we're going to start off with the basic structure of how we do this, and all my interviews are the same, basically, in this respect, that we want to get to know the interviewee before we get to know the situation that they're involved in. So, Rebecca, what's the question I love to ask people, since you're from Newtown, apparently, which is only a few towns over from where I grew up and where I was based. Excuse the technical difficulties here for just a second, folks. So, Rebecca, what brought you to Newtown?
Well, yeah, I grew up in Newtown, and my mother grew up in Newtown. My grandfather moved here probably in the 40s, 50s. And then and now my children are going to public school here and are currently in high school. So I consider myself, like I said in the video, a third generation Newtowner.
Oh, so
born and raised here.
Yeah,
yep.
The short answer is you were born in Newtown. All right. So as some folks may know about Rebecca, she's a little bit more involved. She's actually quite a bit more involved in politics than probably the average person. So what brought you into the world of politics? What brought you to the fore in this matter?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very active in following the latest politics, not just on the local level, but state and national too. I've always been very up on following the issues, and I'm very, I used to write letters to the Newtown Bee, and I've always been, I've gone to some local board meetings and voiced my opinion about things. And just about a year ago, I started a local Newtown blog giving conservative commentary on local issues, Newtown issues that also resonate through the state and national level. So I've always been, very interested in following politics, and so it's just really, and then with this blog that I've been doing, it just really has been driving me to, especially provide a conservative viewpoint on so many issues that are in the local, state, and national realm right now.
Was there a specific hot button topic that like really got your attention? I've had other people say that, for example, the last interview I had was Lisa Hita. She was a town council. She's a council person in New Milford who initially got into politics because there was a natural gas plant that was looking to come into New Milford, and that was the thing that drew her attention to the whole issue. So was there a singular event, or was it more of a gradual transition?
I've always been interested in the Newtown school system and following the Board of Ed, but also after the tragedy, I followed the development of the Newtown Community Center that was built with a $15 million gift from GE Company. Due to the tragedy and wanting to give the town a central gathering point after that happened.
We actually discussed that in our first ever sit down interview. So I actually,
That's right.
So if people want to go to my Facebook page at Michael Sinello and search for Rebecca Carnes and the Newtown Community Center, it's kind of an esoteric topic for those of you who are watching probably from all over the country at this point and all over Connecticut. But we did have our interview. Go ahead.
Actually, Michael, it has direct relevance to what happened with Beto O'Rourke, because that closed meeting was held on the Newtown Community Center. That was it is a public building, and it was built with the $50 million grant from GE, or gift from GE.
And we can actually make that transition as we get further along here. But so in the wake of Sandy Hook, of course, I'm sure that there's been a lot of people that have come to town. So before we get specifically into Beto, has any other major political figure, we'll say, come to Newtown in the wake of the Sandy Hook shooting?
Well, I think everyone knows that Obama visited right after the tragedy, and that, we've had some big state figures, state leaders come pretty regularly to town. Blumenthal visits quite frequently.
Senator from Connecticut.
Yes, and Governor Ned Lamont, marched in our most recent Labor Day parade. Newtown's kind of there's a lot going on here that attracts big name politicians. I call it kind of like the ground zero of the gun debate, the gun control debate, because we have so many spin-off groups after the tragedy that formed that have pretty much morphed into anti-gun groups in town. So, and they are supported by the Democrat Party. So we do get a lot of state and national, or state leaders visiting. And then, of course, we did have President Obama at the time, visit after the tragedy.
So this isn't the first time this sort of thing has happened, then, by any means. So what then brought your attention to the fact that Beto was coming? What was the trigger that? When did you learn? So when or where did you learn about Beto's visit to? I
was having a peaceful morning. Halloween was coming, and I was doing dishes and clean and washing my floors, and I saw a random Facebook post about Beto coming in town. Someone had some information that he was coming in town. And then I kind of reached out to someone on the Newtown Republican Town Committee, and he sent me a screenshot of someone saying that Beto O'Rourke was actually coming to the Sandy Hook Elementary School. So I actually went to Big Y and bought some poster board and this big marker, and I wrote, "Go home Beto," or "Get out Beto," or something. And I just wanted to go kind of give him the message that, what him coming to town, making a big kind of money grab, and meeting with these and making a high profile stop here to kind of pander to the anti-gun groups in town. It just really motivated me to get out there and kind of counteract that. I called for people to come out and rally with me, but of course, if people are working during the day, I was laid off about a year ago, so I'm currently looking for employment. So I was able to go out during the day, but I just wanted to send a message. I've never even done any kind of protesting in my life, and I don't know what motivated me to go and buy a poster board and write that out. But it just really, it really irked me. I was livid that he was coming here, really, truly.
Well, what was it that got you so livid? Was it? I'll leave that open-ended.
It was just so obviously a big profile pandering to the anti-gun groups. I mean, it's like And he's the famous Democrat presidential candidate who said, he was asked at a town hall meeting, are you going to take guns away from people? Are you going to go in, and take them? And he's like, hell yes. Pretty much I'll go in your house and just take your AK, 47 or AR-15 or whatever it is. I'll just take it. And, and I think his campaign was dwindling anyway. He was on his way out, and this was just some kind of last desperate money grab. Whether he kept the money and last minute gave himself a little paycheck on it, or whether he took the money he probably made here by coming to Newtown and dispersed it through other Democratic candidates running at the state level or something, I have no idea. But I think it was horrible to use the kids that died here, exploit that for a money grab in a big political scene, and not even invite the public. Right.
Interesting that you say a few things there about how he was exploiting children for basically political gain, and the tragedy of the Sandy Hook shooting for political gain. But you also talked about money being involved in here. Was this campaign event actually a fundraising event?
He said in a little pre-interview, "I'm not here to campaign. I'm just here to listen to all the voices of Newtown," even though it was a closed meeting close to the public. So, and I highly doubt he would have come here if he wasn't getting some funds from, attracting some funds for the anti-gun groups, or getting some big donations to his campaign from some very connected, probably wealthy people that are involved in the groups here, the anti-gun groups in town too.
What do you mean that it was a closed door event?
So it was not open to the public, only open to certain news media, is what I heard. So when Beto said, "I want to hear all the voices of Newtown," and then I learned that it was closed to the public, and that it was, even though it was being held in a public building, although the two groups, I think it was Moms, or the Newtown Action Alliance and Moms Against Guns or some such.
I think it was MAC or something like it. I don't think it's Moms Against Guns. I think it's Moms Against something else.
Right. Apparently they paid to rent a room out in that public building in our Newtown Community Center. But, I think it's just disingenuous. It was in poor taste. If he's coming here and he bills it, and the groups bill it as some kind of town hall meeting with Newtown to hear the voices of Newtown, but then it's closed to the public and only a handful of people can get in from these, who are part of these basically anti-gun groups in town, I thought it was very disingenuous.
So if it was closed to the public and you somehow got in, how'd you get in?
Yeah, I had no intention of just, busting into the meeting or sneaking into the meeting. That was not my intention at all. Like I said, I went to the community center with a poster board that just said, "Go home, Beto." Someone had told me he actually isn't going to the Sandy Hook Elementary School. So he said, someone told me that he's going to the Newtown Community Center. So I moved over there, and I just did a few Facebook posts, live posts saying, "Here I am. I think it's wrong that he's here." I held up my poster board, and it started to rain. So I went inside, and it was pretty close to 5 o'clock, and I was just, going to use the facilities or something. So I'm going in there, and I'm on my cell phone, and I guess I looked like maybe I belong there, because the woman who was at the door kind of screening people just kind of quickly says to me, "You're all set. You're registered, right?" And I was kind of like, "Oh yeah." I just kind of went with it. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm all set," and I just went in. So
there were clearly people there who weren't, from the media, from the standpoint of like behind a camera or anything. So, like, the room was basically empty. What actually was going on in there? I mean, you said in brief terms, like, can you get more specific about what was happening in that room before you spoke out?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be really a bunch of hand-picked people who were associated with these groups. I mean, you had about a lot of the Moms Demand Action people in their red shirts, and a lot of high-profile people from these groups there. It seemed to be pretty orchestrated and pretty carefully chosen who was there. I think there was less than 100 people. I would say, I'd have to look back at the footage, but I think I showed some of the footage of that. There were a lot of news crews there, with their cameras all lined up along the wall, probably 6 to 8 of them, So
And so, is there any reason that we don't see? You said there were a bunch of news stations there. Well, we see the video from Fox 61. Was there any other news station that posted this video?
no, the only other one I saw was WTNH Channel 8 on Twitter had a different version of it.
All right. So, was NBC there? Was CNN there?
Oh
Who was
yeah,
there?
all the top Connecticut channels were there. Yep.
Okay. All right. And so you said it was like a Q&A event.
Yeah, it was, but I could tell from the onset that they were just choosing planted people that probably had pre-approved questions. And
Did you raise your hand to see if you can get a
I
question?
did. I was
All right.
raising my hand. I was raising my hand, and I was feeling a little frustrated. And I was kind of like, well, I'll just, they're not gonna call on me, but I'll just keep listening. But then a nice gentleman from New Haven, a group in New Haven, he said, who fights against this horrible urban violence that is affecting cities in Connecticut like Bridgeport, New Haven, and happening all across the country, especially in cities like Baltimore and Chicago, where they have hundreds of gun violence deaths in urban communities every weekend, or every week. Asked Beto O'Rourke what he would do to combat urban violence, and Beto started to give what I thought was a BS answer. My favorite word. But so,
Yeah, apparently.
yeah, and I really couldn't contain myself at that point. I was just so outraged, because I knew what he was saying was insincere. And this poor gentleman came up to New Haven, asked him a great question, but the Democrats have really failed the cities, and they don't care. And the beginning of my statement was cut off. I said first to that gentleman, I said, if he cared about you guys, he would have gone to New Haven and Bridgeport. But I said he doesn't care. That's why he's in Sandy Hook, because that's where the money is, and that's the whole. This is Sandy Hook, and Newtown is the big central focal point for the gun debate.
Yeah. Newtown being a town, the second largest town in area in Connecticut, and being a population of around 28,000. You would think that if he was actually going to a real campaign event, he'd go to a large city like a Stamford, like a Bridgeport, like a New Haven, like a Hartford. And you'd think that with the venues that they have, say in Stamford and Hartford, and to a lesser extent Bridgeport, you could have attracted a much larger crowd and have been able to engage in a much more involved town hall event, of course. And of course, here at the Mike Snell Show, we don't discriminate. If you ask a question, we forward it out. Anything that gets posted, we ask. So go ahead and shoot those questions.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
but you're right. If he wanted to hear the big voice from the state on gun violence, or even from Newtown, it would have been at a big place like Hartford, or he would have invited the public of Newtown to all attend the event. But that wasn't the case.
So, before we get into the actual content of what you said, let's talk about the notion of using or exploiting children in tragedy for political gain. So, I could probably think, if I really thought hard about this, I could probably think of a time where a Republican certainly did this some time ago. But is this something that has become commonplace over in Sandy Hook?
Yeah, my feeling is these groups that spun off from the tragedy just like to kind of wallow in it and bring it up whenever it's to their political advantage, and the feeling in Newtown is, kind of hush hush. We don't want to talk about it. We want to, and maybe we should talk about it more openly in a non gun centered way, but it's still, we're still healing. I mean, this was probably one of the worst school shootings in the history of the country, especially because the children were so young. So I think my feeling is that the I call them anti-gun groups because they really are. All of the groups that spun off, the Sandy Hook Promise and the Newtown Action Alliance, all these groups that spun off from the tragedy, their main focus is anti-gun legislation, gun control legislation. And I just, that really irks me. It really gets to me because I've written a post about this probably a few months ago on my blog, Newtown Rooster, that it's not about the guns. I do not believe it's about the guns. If these nihilistic young men who are homicidal want to do damage, even if you take the guns away, they're going to find something to do. just like Timothy McVeigh drove a truck of explosives into Oklahoma City building. But
Yeah, Anfo.
but my main point is the heart of the issue, the heart of the problem, is mental health, and figuring out why these a lot of these men, young men who commit these crimes, get to the point of this nihilistic state.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm kind of with you there, especially as it relates to, the use of the children and for the tragedy. As far as Timothy McVeigh is concerned, what's an interesting story about that is outside of the 9/11 attacks, that is the largest single terrorist event on record in American history, and it was not conducted with guns, and by a mile too. And by the way, with fertilizer. I won't get into too much detail because I don't know how much. I mean, I know the chemistry behind it better than anyone,
right,
because I work with it. But yeah, it was products that were readily available and very easy to make. And to this day, if you know what you're doing, you don't need licenses or anything to get your hands on this sort of thing.
Right.
So I've actually argued that if you remove the guns, which you're not going to, but if you could remove the guns, and what people will go to for these destructive behaviors is bombs, and they're far more deadly, far cheaper.
And it's not about the method that they use for these horrible acts, because if you take away one method or one means, they'll just come up with another. So you have to go to the root of the problem. You can't just treat the symptom. It's like, it's really deep rooted, and it goes to not just psychology and mental health, but it's actually a societal problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, so let's actually come back, since we've gotten off topic just a little bit in towards the guns. You talked about the war in the video itself. You talked about the war on boys and masculinity. So we touched up on mental health. What specifically did you mean by the war on boys and masculinity?
Yeah, I think that's two-pronged, my feeling on that, because I think there's some sort of national movement on the Democrat, liberal, leftist, socialist, whatever part you want to apply to it, that strength and power and gun power and masculinity and everything that men are strong and defend us, and women too in the military, but all that is devalued and actually criticized. And if you look at those Gillette campaigns about the toxic masculinity, that really backfired on them.
Yep.
But I think we need to preserve and celebrate that masculinity and strength and power that come from. Look at the Delta Rangers that just went in and took out al-Baghdadi. That was a tremendous display of force, using gun power in the right way. Strong men protecting us. And what did the Democrats do? They whined about it. They downplayed it. They said, well, Nancy Pelosi wasn't told beforehand. And that was their whole narrative. They just wanted to erase it. And I think that's really horrible. The other I said it was two-pronged, the whole thing I said about boys and masculinity. I think the other issue is somewhat this war against boys, especially at a young age. They're boisterous. They can't sit still in school. They're combative. Female teachers want them to raise their hand, but little boys are, they're not into raising hands. And that's natural. That's innate. But it's something that the American Psychological Association came out very recently and actually said that mass signs of masculinity in boys can lead to mental illness. And, I don't know if we have any Jordan B. Peterson fans out there, but I am a big fan of his, and he really addressed that. And when they issued that statement about 6 months ago, he said he was embarrassed to be a part of the American Psychological Association. I think there's a big war on men's masculinity, boys, and their innate strengths and qualities, and I can't wrap my mind around it to figure it out why there is such this war on that from the left yet, but I'm trying to figure it out, and I think I'm close.
All right. So we've kind of gotten through the content of the video. We've kind of gotten through the content of the notion of using children in tragedy for political gain, which I would love to be able to expand more upon. But I think you and I have actually talked about this in the past, and we actually agree with Ben Shapiro's take on this. So just to give everybody a brief reminder of Ben Shapiro's take, I think he sums it up in about 30 or so seconds, and I just love it. So folks, if you just give us a second, we'll sit right through this.
honestly, Pierce, you've kind of been a bully on this issue, because what you do, and I've seen it repeatedly on your show, I watch your show, and I've seen it repeatedly, what you tend to do is you tend to demonize people who differ from you politically by standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook, saying they don't seem to care enough about the dead kids. If they cared more about the dead kids, they would agree with you on policy.
So I kind of gather from what you were saying that the whole reason for you speaking out is because of the fact that seems to have been what was happening at that meeting.
Absolutely.
Right.
I remember listening to Ben Shapiro say that to Piers Morgan and standing on the graves of the dead children. I absolutely believe that's what we were seeing a little bit of when Beto came to town, and that's absolutely what's going on with these anti-gun groups in town that spun off from the tragedy. They're basically using the graves of the children that died in Sandy Hook to prop themselves up high, and they say, it's all about the guns. And if you counter that argument, they use the death of these children again as a shield. Like, oh, you're disagreeing with me, you must not care about, stopping mass shootings, and you must not care about what horrible things happened to these children. And so they use it as a prop and they use it as a shield. And unfortunately, it sways a lot of people. It's very effective. I think people need to start wising up and thinking a little bit deeper into issues, researching, looking past the propaganda, because it is propaganda coming out from the left. And I
100% agree with you that basically what you do in debate is it's a very poor debate tactic to just take a child, put the child in front of you, and say, basically, like you said, a literal shield. So it's just a way of ending debate. By saying, look, you if you disagree with me politically, you disagree with this kid.
And
or if you have tragedy, if you disagree with me politically, you do disagree with this, And
it's so hard to fight against that, because that's a big tactic with the left. They'll put these shaming labels on you, So if you counteract their whole anti-gun violence thing, it's, oh, you don't care about stopping mass shootings and you don't care about these poor children that died. Or if you counter any of their arguments, you're a racist or you're a bigot, right?
Yeah, we've had that.
The typical labels that they just throw out right away to shame you and silence you and bully you. And I a lot of people reached out to me after this Beto thing and said, and I heard from people across the country, even in Oregon and California, that reached out and said, oh, we wish, we're thinking exactly what you said. And a lot of them said, we wish we could say what you said. But they're scared of retribution. They're scared of losing clients. They're scared of losing their job. They're scared of their neighbors egging their house. They're scared of, their car getting keyed. They're scared of their boss hating them and demoting them. So, the retribution just goes very deep. And,
And so we'll get into the consequences of what you experienced there in just a moment here. But just briefly, do you think, in hindsight being what it is, you could have done what you did with a bit more decorum?
Sure. I definitely looked at
because he wasn't going to call him.
I definitely looked at the comments afterwards and looked at the footage, and I was like, yeah, I wish I could have been more composed, because that's not my natural state. But the adrenaline was going, I was kind of in a den surrounded by the enemy, so to speak. I had kind of infiltrated. My adrenaline was going. I was very passionate and very, very upset about what he was doing there in town. I thought it was very disingenuous. Do I wish I had been more composed? Sure. Yeah, I do. I'd never done anything like this before. I kind of felt like I was taken over somehow. I remember sitting back down thinking, what did I just say? Did I just ruin my life? And I couldn't even replay it in my mind. But looking at the footage, I think I made a lot of good points. I wish I didn't say the BS word. And I know Fox News put that.
Yeah, and folks, sorry you had to sit through that. I wish I had a way of bleeping that, but sorry.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh,
well.
I didn't say it again. I just said BS. Is that bad?
No. On the video I aired at the beginning of the show,
right.
It was. Fox didn't edit it at all, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, I should have in post actually edited that before.
But I also kind of countered that criticism with, I was so outraged, and I wasn't maybe as composed as I wanted to have been. But when you consider what they were doing, maybe what I said was a little harsh, but look at what they were doing. here they were. Here was Beto in this town doing all the things I just criticized him about. I mean, that's pretty offensive. That's pretty damn offensive. Excuse me, pretty offensive. So,
Yeah,
so
it slips.
that's my defense.
Yeah. Do you think that it was that you instituted a heckler's veto, or that it may have come across as being instituting a heckler's veto?
You mean just people negating what I said because I seem like a heckler or
Are
something?
you familiar with the heckler's veto?
No.
Okay, so the heckler's veto is basically the notion that like somebody's going to come in and shout down somebody to a point where they're just no longer able to do anything, and so the actual engagement in the dialogue is just negated by some obnoxious person or group of people in the crowd engaging in belligerence.
Yeah, I don't feel like that applies to me because I was saying debate me, come on, debate me, because Beto just sunk his head down, he dropped his mic, he went like this, and he let his goons surround me. And if he had said, really, a smart, classy, sincere man who was running for president would have said, "Miss, come up here. Let's debate then. I'll address your questions." And he would have taken that on in front and center, I think, because, if he was sincere about what he was doing, if he had any guts, if he truthfully could have countered some of my arguments, I think that would have been the smart thing for him to do.
Yeah, and I think the perfect example of the appropriate response is 2 towns over you in New Milford. This sort of thing happened just so much as I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So there was a protester on the green in New Milford who was protesting the current mayor during the election campaign, and what happened during the previous mayor's tenure was they watched from town hall and called the police. This mayor came out, shook this person's hand and said, "Let's talk. What do you want to talk about?" And I agree with you. That's the way to do this. Now,
right.
I'll add my 2 cents that there's probably a better way than jumping up and shouting at somebody in the middle. I mean, I realize he wasn't going to call on you, but I'm sure there are better ways to have gone about that.
Yeah, I don't know though. I have to disagree because listen,
Okay.
I had to sneak in. Public wasn't invited. Okay, he wasn't taking my questions, and I felt almost compelled. I felt almost like compelled on behalf of everyone who was shut out of that meeting, everyone in Newtown who had a different opinion than those handful of people in the room. I felt compelled to do it that way. Like I said, I wish I had been more composed. My adrenaline was going. I was very upset about what he was doing and what those groups were doing. But I accept that criticism, and of course, I've never done anything like this before, really. I mean, even getting the poster board and writing "Go Home Beto" and holding it up, I've never even been in a protest in my life. So I don't know. I guess I'll give myself credit for the first time ever. It wasn't too bad.
So speaking of doing something for the first time, in doing something like this for the first time, you've kind of become a little bit of a cause celebrity. So what has been the response so far?
Yeah, I have to say I was blown away by the response, because when those comments started coming in, and people were sending me texts like, "Have you been reading these comments on Fox 61? People are calling you a patriot. People are calling you a hero. People are saying, you go girl. This is exactly how I feel, or this is what I could say to them all." And that those big high fives and those big pats on the back after this happened, and I was really questioning what I had done and how it would resonate, if I did the right thing. And I mean, hundreds, I don't know what the final viral count was, but I think hundreds of thousands, either by comments on posts or on news articles like in Daily Wire and stuff. If you aggregate all of that together, plus the comments and people reaching out to me, I think it's fair to say hundreds of thousands of people were in support of what I said.
So how about the response from the community in Newtown?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot of good response from Facebook groups, private and public in town, just kind of echoing at a state and national level what people were saying. And, a lot of these open boards, people could comment from the left or the right, Democrat or Republican. And I would say that probably about 90 to 95% probably or higher were in favor of what I did. In Newtown, yeah, there's some criticism. I just received either directly or on these Facebook groups, just kind of saying, what the criticism was. Maybe you should have gone about this in a more sophisticated manner and been more composed. And I accept that criticism. I think my defense is that I was very passionate. I was just feeling very passionate, and nothing was rehearsed. That all came from the heart. That all came from my gut and from my heart, from my soul.
Well, it didn't look rehearsed.
No, like I said, I couldn't even remember when I sat back down what had come out of my mouth. I was just praying for the best. I think I made some good points, and people did come back to me and say, you nailed it. And there's so much more I feel like I could have said. I didn't say, this was close to the public and you didn't but then people said, on a national level, that wouldn't have resonated very well. They said the points that you did hit about mental health, about urban violence, about Democrats failing, really is what resonated on a national level. And I think that's why a lot of places like big blogs like Red State, Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire picked it up, Town Hall picked it up. All these big Republican conservative blogs, websites, media personalities, a lot of them commented on it. But if you look at the mainstream media like CNN and MSNBC and such, or similar Democrat-centered, left liberal-centered media, they did not cover it at all. These points I made, and even our local newspaper, the Newtown Bee, a day or two later, their edition came out, and it was a big splashing image of Beto with all of the gun group people, and all it said was, Beto visits for town hall, yay. But my theory about the Newtown Bee is that they're just a public relations tabloid for the town. They're not even profitable. They're not profitable. They're funded by some bigwig in town, and all they do is regurgitate this public relations crap for the town. I really think they're worthless. So, anyway.
But have any of those other outlets actually reached out to you, say like the Daily Wire or Red State?
No, it's funny because Ben Shapiro did just one solid post on it. He said she flattened him, and then he had a whole article on just me and what I said to Beto. And I took that opportunity to reach out to Ben Shapiro, and I was like, hey, Ben, can I come on the show? And I want to be the next, Michael Knowles or some such nonsense. But I figured I'll give it a shot, right? Because I am a big fan of his. So
are we on a bit of an exclusive here right now then?
Yeah, this is an exclusive first interview on the Michael Sinello show. So, yeah.
Well, you heard it here, folks.
Yep.
So has there been any actual backlash?
The next day, I felt emboldened to finally put my Trump 2020 sticker on my Jeep. And someone tore it off the next day. So I was like, But backlash, I think some people just saying mean-spirited stuff online about me.
So nothing in like the grocery store or like...
Oh, no, but I'm trying to avoid the kind of liberal hangouts in town, restaurants and such that I know maybe, I don't want a big frappuccino thrown at my head or something, but we'll
or
see.
A milkshake, yeah.
Yeah.
So we should just briefly talk about what is the political makeup of Newtown, so folks get an understanding of what the community response
it's
should be
tough
expected.
Because I feel like it's overwhelmingly Democrat and liberal, but then I have Republicans tell me, no, there's like a sleeping giant of Republicans here. And I'm like, really? There's more like conservatives in town? And they tell me yes, but I don't see it. And I think that's true in any town, state, or I shouldn't say any, but many towns, states, and across the country where Republicans are just lying low because of this retribution factor.
Yeah.
Or censoring factor or shaming label factor. So I get this. I get the sense it's a very liberal, outwardly liberal town.
So that's the feeling you get from it. So I've actually looked into the data behind that.
Okay.
Right. So you've given folks the eye test, which is very valuable. But Newtown is fairly blue, not as dark blue as say like Bridgeport. But in terms of voting record, in terms of local voting records, in terms of voter registration rolls, you're blue. You're comfortably blue, not light blue, not purple, not like Mao, but comfortably blue over in Newtown. And to contrast that, two towns over in New Milford, where I'm from and where some of our viewers may actually be from here, is pink. So not purple, not red, just barely more Republican based on voting records and registration totals. So we talked about the public response you've been getting. You said you're on the job hunt. Do you think that this sort of thing is going to affect your ability to get a job?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because before this Beto thing happened, I had a really big job interview lined up in Bridgeport at a big company. I guess I won't name their name, but
what do they do? What do they do?
Well, I know. What do? They were a division of a big company that handled they were a big water company.
Okay.
In the state. Starts with an A.
Well, I think you just gave it away.
All right, I'll just say it. It was with Aquarian, and the CEO, someone texted me that the CEO lives in Newtown too. So I'm like, oh, that's why they canceled. I had this. So anyway, before the Beto thing happened, I had this big job interview lined up for a really big job as their digital communications director. It was like $85,000 a year. Anyway, this Beto thing broke, and then the Tuesday night before my interview at 7:00 at night, some random person who wasn't even from the company calls and it was like, oh, we really need to postpone this interview. We'll get back to you. And then I woke up the next morning, they called right away and they're like, we've decided to go with another candidate. So
yeah.
Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but my gut tells me I'm probably not reading too much into it. Someone Googled me or gave them the heads up.
Yeah, I don't know that they necessarily even needed to Google you, because to be frank, I mean, this video on Fox 61's YouTube page, it has 8 times the viewership of the rest of their videos. I'm looking at it right now. It's got 457,000 views, and the like bar is basically all blue with this little like sliver of gray negative at the end of it. And I actually want to talk about that just a little bit too, because we talked about the effect of your experience here on you. I want to know what your take is on the effect that on Beto, because, and I'll just say at least this much, the fact of the matter is that you did what you did, and then less than 3 days later, less than 72 hours later, Beto announces that he's dropping from the race.
Yeah. I kind of feel like someone who was in charge of his campaign, or maybe was funding his campaign the most or something, someone with clout above him said, listen, if you can't make it in blue Connecticut, in blue Newtown, pretty much like you said, this isn't going to work, buddy. You got to get out now. And I think it also tamped down on my video going either further. I mean, if he had stayed a candidate for president, my video might have gotten more play and it would have attracted more attention and views, so, but then people were like, oh, you gave the death blow to Beto. And
I mean, just if I may interrupt you here just a bit, the comments on this video are quote, I'm about to end this man's whole career, 153 likes. And then the response is, she did. And then there's another response here that has 401 likes. It's probably the most liked comment on here. And LOL, and just like that, Beto's presidential run was finished. Yeah. And there's plenty of people on here that this lady ended Francis O'Rourke's career, 175 likes. So there is plenty of there is certainly a groundswell of people who believe that this is at least the icing on the cake that sealed the deal.
Yeah, I mean, at first, like I said, people were like, oh, you gave him the death blow, you gave him the coup de grace. And I said, I think, his campaign was petering out anyway.
Yeah, he was polling between 0 and 2%, depending on.
But then I said that, and then they would get back to him and they were like, just take the credit. And I was like, okay. But,
yeah, I mean, I would like to think that was the case, that you were at the very least, the straw that broke the camel's back. But
yeah, well, the timing was very interesting.
It was convenient to say the least.
Right.
All right, so we went over the data on Fox's YouTube page, and we went over the effect on Beto. So I guess there's not really too much more to talk about this. Is there anything you'd like to bring up?
Just about, I got some criticism about making that comment about the cities and the urban violence there, and the lack of concern on the Democrats' part to ease any of the gun violence in the cities. And people were saying, she probably doesn't even care and stuff. And that is not true. I just want to put it out there that I don't know if anyone knows who Candace Owens is or Larry Elder. They speak out. Candace Owens is actually from Stamford, Connecticut. They speak out all the time about how the problem with these in these cities with the violence and all kinds of problems is the fatherless homes. And I really think that the Democrats almost perpetuate this. You know, if a woman gets divorced and the husband leaves, she actually gets more social support and more money from the state if there's a fatherless home. I think that's the heart of the problem. I think the Democrats don't really care about solving the gun violence problem that's in the cities. I think they want to perpetuate it. Part of me thinks they want people to live in fear. They pander a lot to the inner city folk. You know, they make them dependent on the state, and that's a definite. They make them dependent on the state, on the Democrats that provide these social systems, and then they have their votes. They have their guaranteed votes from these people. I think it's a horrible, vicious cycle. And when I said that to that gentleman, he doesn't care about you, sir. That's why he's in Sandy Hook. That's why he's not going to New Haven and Bridgeport. They don't care. They don't care about the gun violence in cities. They care, they care about this whole gun grab thing, and that's a very deep and complicated issue on a national level that goes against the Second Amendment. And I think it's horrible. I think we need to have good civilians, good men and women who are armed to protect us from these mass shootings and to protect us. There was a story out in Washington State recently of a shooter in a Walmart, and he took out 4 people, and an armed citizen, a really good man, took that shooter out right away, got him, stopped it from being 4 people, stopped it from just killing 4 people to a lot more. And what did Walmart do? Because Walmart and so many of these companies kowtow to the Democrat and liberal pressure, they banned guns from Walmart now. That story came out maybe 6 months ago, so look it up.
Yeah.
It's like the Democrats do the opposite of what would help stop mass shootings and mass shooters and gun violence.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that matter, especially when you have a soft target like a school or something like that. The thing you want to have is not only do you want to have as many people who are willing and capable of carrying those firearms, you don't want to have people know who they are, because then they become this is how we won the American Revolution in many respects. Is that we saw the lieutenants that had the funny officers' hats, and we targeted them from the distance. And that's what these shooters are going to do. If you know who has the guns in a school, for example, the first thing you're going to do is find the guys that have indicators that they've got guns, take them out, and now you've got free reign to do whatever you want. So if you have a concealed carry, what you have is a situation where nobody knows who's got what. So anyone. And
the biggest joke about it that goes antithetical to the whole purpose of solving this problem is they want to take the guns away from good people and put all these laws and legislations in place. And who's not going to follow those laws? Oh yeah, the bad guys, the mass shooters, are going to just get a gun illegally and do whatever the hell they want anyway, right?
Yeah, so we're seeing that in London.
It doesn't make sense, and it's antithetical to solving the problem. But I don't think the Democrats really care about solving the problems. Really, I don't think they do, about so many problems, not just violence, gun violence, or any kind of mass shootings or any kind of homicidal violence.
The pushback that I would offer you there is that I'm much more willing to apply Hanlon's razor, which is a heuristic that suggests that you shouldn't apply malice to a situation. You shouldn't confer malice when you can just as easily confer incompetence. So I'm willing at this point to confer incompetence, for the most part. So if we're good here, then I'll give you one more opportunity to tell, before we get into Q&A. I'll give you one more opportunity to tell people how they can reach you.
Oh yeah, you can check out my blog, newtownroosterct.com, and that has my email. Or you can just look me up on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, just by searching Rebecca Carnes Newtown or Rebecca Carnes Connecticut, and it'll pop up, and you can reach me that way.
All right, super. So I just scrolled through the YouTube comments. There are plenty of them. However, I don't see any questions. I'll go on to Facebook, see if there's any questions here. Again, we've got plenty of reactions and stuff here, but I guess nobody has any questions for you, Rebecca. So, folks, I'll say it. You had your opportunity. Rebecca, thanks for coming on so much.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
All right, everybody, you can check out Rebecca Carnes at the places that she just mentioned. I'll try to get those things linked to this video's description afterwards in post. And until the next time, this has been Mike and Rebecca signing off. See ya.
Signing off. Bye.